afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to today's seminar on why is India struggling with manufacturing competitiveness, to be presented by Dr. Prerna Prabhakar. She is an associate fellow at Center for Social and Economic Progress, CSEP. Her research primarily focuses on trade and industrial policies. She has held various positions at CEW, NCAER, IAFT, would be to name just a few among many others. Today's session would be chaired and moderated by Professor Sanjay Kathuria, a visiting senior fellow at CSEP. He is a co-founder of Trade Sentinel and a visiting faculty at Ashoka University. He is also a non-resident senior fellow at ISAS NUS and a global fellow at Wilson Center at Washington, D.C. He has a vast experience of more than 40 years of experience and is recognized as a preeminent thinker and commentator on economic development, growth, and integration in South Asia. The presentation will be followed by a conversation between Anil Bhardwaj, R.P. Goyal, TG Srinivasan, and Prerna Prabhakar. Our first discussant is Anil Bhardwaj. He is the Secretary General of Federation of Indian MSME. He is a private sector development and a trade professional and an expert in Indian MSMEs. He is also a governing board member of Entrepreneurship Development Institute at Ahmedabad. Our second discussant is R.P. Goyal, who is a trade advisor to the Shahi Group and a guest faculty at IIFT. After serving for about 33 years in different capacities with Government of India as a civil servant, he retired in 2021 as Additional Director General of Foreign Trade at TGFT. Our third and final discussant is our very own Senior Visiting Fellow at CSEP, TG Srinivasan. He specializes in trade, macroeconomics, and poverty reduction. He's a co-founder of Trade Sentinel. He has made significant contribution to the World Bank as senior economist and to the Ministry of Finance in Oman. Currently, his work is primarily oriented towards trade policy and economic relations within the South Asian region. Thank you all for joining us. Now over to Professor Sanjay Kathuria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy, and welcome to everybody. And I hope the gathering today, the size of the gathering, the interest is a reflection of our paper and not on the issues on he who shall not be named today. It is not a discussion of this. Today is not a discussion on Trump tariffs, but it is a discussion on our own tariffs, amongst many other issues. So I think one of the issues is that it gives us an opportunity for self-reflection, and we hope to bring this out before you in the paper, which has been done jointly by Prerna, TG, and I, and also with our colleague Bharan Pradhan, who should be somewhere. You can raise your. Where are you, Bharan? You're not here? Okay. So I'll have a brief few opening remarks. Perhaps it is not inappropriate today to remind ourselves of the importance of trade in our heady growth years in the Indian economy overall, and the fact what export pessimism did to us, until the in the 90s did to the Indian economy. The importance of trade for global poverty reduction for India and China, Bangladesh, and Vietnam. Very important examples of global poverty reduction using the deep and elastic markets that the global trade provides. And India has benefited enormously from that link between trade and jobs, trade and poverty reduction. Manufacturing is a core part of that story because manufacturing provides large number of jobs and provides good quality jobs, very important point to note. But so while we have done well, obviously there is a big issue, but why we haven't done well enough. And domestically too, if you look at the data, in 1995, manufacturing was 18% of value added in India. And in 2023, this was down to 13%, right? Even it was as much as 16% in 2015. So manufacturing has declined despite our goals, despite all that, the goals for, and Viksit Bharat, I think the goal is what, 25% or something like that. Yeah.
Yes.
So now the other part of the issue is, and what I'm sure question that many of us will have for is why India is not a bigger part of the China plus one story. And we hope to provide some answers to that. Many ideas have been tried on the China, on how to get manufacturing going, labor-intensive manufacturing. And the latest salvo on that, which began a few years ago, was the PLI, the Production-Linked Incentive Scheme. But even before that, there have been many serious attempts at policy reform. Logistics have improved. The doing business has improved, at least on, some of the data tells us that. Infrastructure has improved. There have been tax reforms. And yet we have not really been a major beneficiary of the China plus one story. I mean, Vietnam, Indonesia, Turkey, Thailand, Mexico, of course, these seem to have benefited a lot more from that part of the story. So I hope that, we will be able to, the presentation that Prerna will have will provide some answers as to why not, why we haven't really made enough inroads. And so now I come back to the topic of the day, which is tariffs, right? And I think the question that all of us should ask when we all plead for protection, or some segments of Indian industry plead for protection, is that it's been 78 years today since independence, right? Today, a country 7% the size of India exports more manufactures than India. We know what we're talking about, right? Vietnam. It exports more manufactured goods than India. So the story, so what is behind that story is what we'll present to you. But it's important to remember in our discussion that very often we talk only about exports, right? We don't discuss the import side of the story, which is so intimately linked, right? There is a very strong symmetry between exports and imports, and export growth and import growth, right? So I will leave you with these few initial thoughts. The study that Prerna will present to you, we hope will show you, it'll be new and have some new insights for you. Looks at core competitors for India in the China plus one story. There is a predictive index that has been made. And also, very importantly, there are industry insights that have been garnered in order to buttress and to embellish and ground the index-based story. So, and we're very happy that, we have representatives. So that's very carefully chosen representatives from industry to talk to you about real life, real world issues. So with that, thank you for your interest, and thanks, Prerna, over to you.
Okay. Thanks, Sanjay, for setting the context for the discussion today. I'll first begin with thanking my research intern, Ms. Rishika Kumar, who provides extensive research support for the work and is now with the Ministry of Commerce preparing action plans for Trump tariffs. So I think this Sanjay has already talked about. I'll start with some numbers. India's share in global manufacturing exports as of 2023 was lower than even Vietnam. So this is a stark figure, and that starts, that gives a good start to this discussion and, puts the question right there. While there have been many studies that have looked at competitiveness issues, and even the government of India has tried to address competitiveness problems through schemes like production-linked incentives, but the problem still persists. And with recent changes, brought by Trump in terms of high tariffs and possibilities of realignment of supply chains, manufacturing competitiveness question becomes even more important. So this study, tries to find answers to the questions relating to what prevents India from achieving manufacturing competitiveness. And for that, we prepare a competitiveness index for India and its key Asian competitors based on certain competitiveness parameters. And we corroborate this by discussing the findings with the industry stakeholders, which gives us a very good blend of a bird's eye view and also the on-ground perspective. And finally, we provide some crisp goal-oriented policy solutions. This is the outline. I'll just present some key trends for trade, India and its key trading partners. I'll discuss more about the competitiveness index and insights from the industry discussions, followed by the policy recommendations. So let's start with certain key trends. I'll start discussing, the export baskets of key economies like China, Vietnam, and India. So what you see on the screen on this slide is the share of top 5 export items in respective economies' export basket. So what we see that over years, more products have been added to China's export basket, which is the first figure. So they have now, they focus on products, high-tech and high-value-added products like electronics, industrial machinery, and now also automobiles. And Vietnam, again, really stark. So they started with minerals, for the first year that you have there, 2001. And from there, as minerals as the top exported item, now they have moved to electronics, being their top exported item. And we all know the success stories of Samsung and Apple. So again, their move from low value added to high value added and high-tech goods can be seen in the composition of their export basket. But what do we see for India? That while, the latest year, it shows some positive signs in terms of electronics and industrial machinery appearing in the top exported items, but we are largely dominated by items like gems and jewelry and minerals, which are low value added items, and it prevents our integration into the global supply chains, which brings us to this slide where, we see backward linkages in the global value chains, which dominate the world trade. It accounts for 70% of the global trade. But we see the backward linkages basically imply how much of imported inputs are being used for exports. And we see China is up there and India is low in the order. So clearly, because of our focus on low value added items, we are not integrated into the global supply chains. And one of the primary reasons for that is our high tariffs. And obviously with recent developments, it's a good opportunity for us to reconsider this. And specifically items of intermediate in nature. So that's the most important thing for integrating into value chains. So if we see, India has the highest tariff across countries on this slide. So other than import tariffs, there are many other factors that are responsible for a country's competitiveness. And we use the Porter Diamond model to assess nation's competitiveness, which is based broadly on 4 pillars. Demand conditions to factor in the kind of demand landscape and its impact on the competitiveness. Factor conditions to capture the factors of production and its impact on competitiveness. Then you have related and supporting industries to take into account certain supportive factors like availability of inputs, infrastructure, then firm strategy and structure, broadly accounting for firm-related characteristics like ownership, etc. So these broad 4 pillars are also influenced by 2 exogenous parameters or pillars. According to the original Porter Diamond model, it was a chance pillar, which was to capture disasters or crises. But then in this modified Porter Diamond model, we replaced it with the pillar on global trade policy, because that is one of the drawbacks of the original Porter Diamond model. It doesn't comment much on our global outlook. So I'll explain how have we modified and what are the subcomponents. And then finally, according to the Porter Diamond model, there's a pillar on government, which captures the role of government policies on competitiveness. And we have renamed it to regulatory quality to account for important parameters that influence the regulatory quality in our country. So with these 6 pillars, we have these 6 pillars, and in these 6 pillars, we have certain subcomponents that define these pillars. There are a total of 36 subcomponents, and broadly, majorly, these subcomponents are derived from a database called World Bank's Enterprises Survey, which is a firm-level survey, and it was implemented. The latest year for this survey in different countries varies. So we have taken the latest year for the countries under consideration. So in terms of the countries that we have chosen, the countries are obviously India and its key Asian competitors, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam. So the basis for that was a recent Nomura report, according to which these countries are the key contenders for relocation of supply chains away from China. But then now I feel that these countries become quite relevant in the recent developments again that have happened, because the tariffs relatively for these countries by the US are higher as compared to India. And if we work on our competitiveness, I mean, the issue that we will be talking about, it can give us an edge. So once we have these subcomponents, under these 6 pillars are standardized so that the values lie between 0 to 100. And each of the subcomponents under a respective pillar is averaged to get that pillar value. And the pillars are averaged to get the composite competitiveness value, which is then compared across countries. I don't know if that's visible. It's quite dense, but then I'll just spend 1 minute on this. So when I was talking about subcomponents, this is how these are structured. So for example, factor conditions the factor conditions pillar has these subcomponents under this, which varies from unit labor cost, R&D information, then information on access to finance, land-related issues. Then demand conditions broadly captures foreign demand and domestic demand. Related and supporting industries has factors like imports on intermediate goods. Then you have firm strategy, structure, and rivalry, where we have computed a key subcomponent reflecting a firm, the firm concentration in a country. So it's a proxy variable that we have created. And regulatory quality has usual regulatory related issues, customs, tax, labor regulations. But the important pillar that we have modified, the global trade policy pillar, it has a subcomponent on a country's engagement with key trade agreements, for which we have considered CPTPP, RCEP, and an agreement with the EU. And a country's MFN tariffs, most favored nation tariffs. So this reflects broadly a country's global trade policy, and accordingly, we will score the countries on this particular pillar that we have modified in the Porter Diamond model. So I'll just talk about the findings of the competitiveness index. First key finding, that India on a composite level, which is the lowest most row, it has the lowest score on the composite level, very much close to Indonesia. And in terms of the pillars, India has the lowest score on the factor conditions and on firm strategy, structure, and rivalry, and global trade policy. And also on regulatory quality and demand, and regulatory quality, and the other one, which is related and supporting industries. Again, it has a low score, and it does fairly well on the demand conditions pillar. So I'll just explain what constitutes these performances across the pillars. So on factor conditions, if we can see that mostly India is lagging on most of, India doesn't lead on any of the subcomponents, but it's lagging on many of the subcomponents like labor productivity, its investments on R&D, then access to finance, and land-related issues. On the demand conditions, which is the only pillar where India scores decently, we see that it's because there's a 50-50. While India is largely dominated by domestic market, they do not serve well the external demand. So by the way, these are the rankings. So we had the scores, but then I have ranked the countries just for better understanding. So 5 is the lowest rank and 1 is the best rank. And for related and supporting industries, again, it has low value because of its high tariff on intermediate goods, which is a key determinant for integration into global value chains. For firm strategy, structure, and rivalry, we see that India, although Indonesia is the worst performing on the firm concentration subcomponent, but we see that India, again, also performs poorly on this particular subcomponent, which means that India has high firm concentration. And that's the reason that it ranks low on the firm strategy, structure, and rivalry pillar. And on global trade policy, as expected, as India is not part of the key agreements, that is EU, RCEP, and CPTPP, so it has the lowest score. And also it has the highest tariff, so it has the lowest score. I'll not discuss the regulatory quality pillars in detail. So with these results of the competitiveness index, we try to corroborate these with discussion with the industry stakeholders. And these were the four sectors that we chose: auto components, apparel, electronics, and pharmaceutical. And again, coincidentally, other than pharmaceutical, all sectors in terms of India's exports are going to be affected with the Trump tariffs. So we had discussions with industry organizations and private players in these sectors. And we analyzed this in the same framework that we used for the competitiveness analysis. That's the Porter Diamond model framework. So I'll just very quickly tell you the summary of the key insights. So for factor conditions, while many of the sectors felt that skilled labor is a challenge, our analysis from the competitiveness index, doesn't comply with, it's not consistent with this finding. And we find that skilled labor is not a challenge as far as Indian competitiveness is concerned. While yes, R&D and innovation is a challenge. For demand conditions, sectors like apparel, they mentioned that how our exports or production is not aligned with what the world is demanding. And we are largely a domestic demand-driven economy, which again is corroborated by our CI findings, where we find that domestic production largely serves domestic demand and not the external demand. For related and supporting industries, high custom duties were highlighted. And also there was stress on poor supply chain integration within the domestic economy. So we need clustering of the production processes. For firm strategy, structure, and rivalry, while we could not discuss it with individual sectors, but then the discussion with the MSME body, and we have Mr. Anil Bhardwaj from there, they emphasized on how there's huge concentration within Indian industry, and that leads to high input prices and lack of competitiveness, which we find through our pillar in the CI index also. For regulatory quality, issues on high administrative burden was highlighted, and it was found in the CI analysis as well, and it's very well known to people. For global trade policy, a little hesitation in terms of signing FTAs was shown in our discussions with the industry, while it was mentioned that FTAs should be leveraged to negotiate the non-tariff barriers. So, and it's quite corroborated with our CI findings.
That's 4 minutes.
Yes. So, based on our competitiveness index analysis and discussions with the industry and the insights, we have, again, under the Porter Diamond framework, identified key priorities, that are important for India's competitiveness. So for factor conditions, definitely investments in R&D and not that much skilled labor, but then facilitating labor mobility by providing, good urbanization policies that attract relevant labor, appropriate labor. It's more important than the skilled labor challenge. In demand conditions, again, it's very important to address the issues that lead to misalignment with the global demand. For related and supporting industries, again, very important to reduce the tariffs on the intermediate goods, which are important for the value chains, and also implement policies which help in clustering of the production processes. Regulatory quality, as the size of the firms is a problem, so we need to work on the thresholds of the labor laws, which we'll discuss in the policy suggestions. And for global trade policy, we need to lower our tariffs and engage with key trading partners through agreements like RCEP, CPTPP, and agreements with EU and UK. Based on the analysis, the CI analysis, industry discussions, and with our priorities, we have 4 broad policy suggestions. Number 1, which is again very relevant in the current times, rationalize and lower tariffs. So high tariffs, everyone would agree that they create anti-export bias by making the high input costs higher and the entire production uncompetitive. And some people argue about duty drawbacks. So, but in our discussions and analysis and research, we found that these duty drawback rates are quite low to compensate for these higher import tariffs, and there are administrative delays. So many firms do not even avail these duty drawbacks. And, on one hand, you are implementing schemes like the production-linked incentive scheme, but then it's undermined by high tariffs, which increases the cost of production. Finally, the problem is that, when we try to understand the textile apparel supply chain, we found that it's very important to rationalize the tariff across the supply chain and not pick one part of the supply chain and not proportionally decrease the other part of the supply chain in terms of the tariff, because it would then create a negative effective protection and it will make the downstream production uncompetitive. So there have been some efforts by the government in the past by lowering duties on certain sectors, but then it's not a comprehensive approach. So, for example, sectors like smartphones have been focused, but then we see that overall average tariff has increased over years. So the solution is to focus on the comprehensive supply chain and not parts, different parts of the supply chain. And one of the ways to tackle this problem is the FTA approach, which is our next policy suggestion to engage in deeper FTAs. The problem is that we are not part of a lot of key agreements, whereas our competitors like Vietnam are. So we should be focusing on engaging with these countries. So the positive steps have been that we have in the recent past signed agreements with Australia, UAE, Mauritius, and EFTA, but then it's very important to sign and engage with countries like EU and UK to, for the competitiveness implications. So as solutions, we say that we should not be looking to FTAs with the Asian countries as a threat, but as an opportunity to integrate into the global value chains. And FTAs serve as the second best alternative and also politically acceptable, again, in line with what's happening around, alternative to the unilateral tariff reductions. And one more important point that has been raised by a lot of industry representatives was that FTAs become an opportunity or a platform to negotiate increasing non-tariff measures. And even from India's end, we see a lot of quality control orders being implemented, which disrupts the supply chain. So it becomes a platform to negotiate and arrive at the mutual recognition solutions for such barriers. Finally, enhancing regulatory quality. Here we talk about 2 broad issues. One is firm size. So we see that Indian industry is characterized by small firms and missing middle because of the problem of labor laws that put threshold in terms of the labor size, and it gives perverse incentives for the firms, and they try to stay small. And poor urbanization policies, which are characterized by limited land availability, and also because of the poor planning, it raises the living cost for the people, and it makes difficult to attract them to the manufacturing centers. Government has made some efforts in this direction in terms of making the labor codes, which states have adopted, and there are different stages, but there's no movement as such on this front. And there have been some industrial parks that have been approved by the government, but some states like Tamil Nadu, they do exhibit efficient manufacturing ecosystem creation, and we have a box in our paper to discuss that. So as solution, it's very important to increase the thresholds in the labor laws, which would help us with the problem, and which would help us solve the problem of the missing middle, and facilitate labor mobility by providing facilities in form of dormitories or transport infrastructure. Overall, creating the manufacturing ecosystem that would help in labor mobility across the country. Finally, our last policy suggestion is to foster technological development, which is very important if we want to stay in the game. We have low R&D investment, as we all know, and government initiatives have not worked to yield the benefits in terms of increasing the R&D investment. So what we need here is to foster competition in the industry, both at domestic level and also the foreign competition. And also, in terms of tax incentives, why they haven't worked, it's broadly because of the eligibility criteria set by the body DSIR. So these needs to be relaxed so that there's more investment in R&D. Yes, so finally, to expand, we have done this calculation. So to expand from 13% manufacturing share in GDP to the ambitious 25%, the manufacturing sector has to grow at 13.6%. And this high growth is not possible just based on the domestic demand, and we have to rely on export to reach this level of manufacturing growth. And given this, it's very important to correct our competitiveness parameters ecosystem so that we are able to leverage what's happening in the world and improve our manufacturing export competitiveness. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much, Prerna. I think the one thing that I'd like to point out for reflection is that there is a strong interrelationship between many of the issues especially on the trade front. The fact that you have no deep commitments on the foreign trade on FTAs, you have high MFN tariffs, right? So the two are going together. Related point, domestic demand is firms are reporting in the CI analysis. Firms are reporting reliance on the domestic market, so they're not either being pushed to take, because you have a high domestic market, which can be a double-edged sword for firms, because you're not being pushed to export. And the third related issue is concentration. Again, we're seeing high concentration, growing concentration again. That reduces competition and creates less pressures to export. So all of them are interrelated, and the fact that in India's political economy today, most likely we're not going to see unilateral tariff reduction. So it's going to be the route we're going to take is through FTAs, right? So with major trading partners, you reduce tariffs for your major trading partners, and hopefully that means for most of your trade. So with that, let me call on our first discussant, Mr. Anil Bhardwaj from FISME. And I think there's a lot of relevance. We even had a discussion actually with both of you in the preparation of this study, and how some of these issues that we come up finally with, what Prerna presented, how do you see them from your perspective? And obviously tariffs is front and center. It's coming out front and center in your study, but we know it's very important, especially for the segment of industries that you represent. So we'd be very excited, looking forward to hearing from you. Would you like to go up then?
Yeah, okay, sure.
So about 8 to 9 minutes.
All right, yeah, okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. First of all, I must thank CSEP for engaging FISME in this very, very important study, and the authors also, and inviting me to share with you some of the insights that I have on this issue. So first of all, I must congratulate the authors for this very important study. I think that it would make a very valuable contribution, especially because of its innovative take through the Porter's diamond model. Intuitively, we know many of these things that have come up, and we were expecting those results. But coming out of a rigor of objective analysis, I think lends credibility to the whole hypothesis. So what I would do is quickly, first I'll comment on the choice of Porter's diamond model for conducting this study, and then a couple of binding constraints. So if we look at the Porter's diamond model, we have to look also the timing of this model. Approximately, it was 1990, and we were in the middle of the rugby round. So they were already, as a matter of fact, Motek Singh Ahluwalia ji had already written a paper that, by 1995, we had already started the reform process, opening up in the economy. And it was not exactly 1991, but as a matter of fact, it started around 1995. So this was a time when the world was also moving towards opening up. And it was that time that this model came. And we had already, you can say, became accustomed to the concepts of perestroika and glasnost by that time. But it misses two very, very important developments in human history. It predates. One is emergence of WTO, and then later on, China joining WTO in 2001. WTO came in 1995. So it was approximately 4 to 5 years before this very important event. And the second was emergence of ICT as an earth-shattering sort of technological development. So these two together, as a matter of fact, created a new way of doing trade. So whatever classical trade was happening according to the theory of Ricardo, suddenly we had a situation from mid of 1990 to 2010 or so, that whatever the West had gained in 200 plus years suddenly was reversed in just 25 years. And this was possible because the WTO provided the framework with the help of agreements like TRIMS, IPRs, that Western companies could share technology to the third countries. And then the ICT provided the enabler by which they could outsource, or offshoring became possible. So as a matter of fact, the most important development had been that it was not just the product that started getting exported, it was intermediaries, which was, as a matter of fact, a euphemism for nothing but for stages of production. So it was not the final product, it was just a small one portion of that product range or a stage that was exported. Now it is called, if I could quote Professor Richard Baldwin, who has recently written a very interesting book called The Great Convergence, and where he finds that and presented a model of TOSP, which is task, occupation, stages, and product. So as a matter of fact, today's global value chains are marked not by products movement, but by the movement of task, occupation, stages, and product. So that might be something that I think we might miss through this model. Coming to the binding constraints, we know a couple of them already, but let me enrich the discussion from the MSME perspective. Finance and banking. Professor Vivek Devroy used to say that the biggest monopoly in the world in the banking sector is public sector banks in India, because there's one, they are reporting to just one boss. As a matter of fact, Lavish is sitting here, both of who wrote a book on small scale industry, large scale exit problems. So there's one chapter where he specifically mentions this issue, and this continues. As a matter of fact, Ajay Chibber wrote an article on this issue just a day before in Business Standard. And let me quickly read out. India's huge government spending has led to a large fiscal deficit. He has given a chart, so we can forget that. Since 1991, the combined fiscal deficit of the center and the states have averaged a whopping 7.8% of GDP. Fiscal dominance has compelled the Reserve Bank of India to keep government borrowing costs low to the arcane instrument of statutory liquidity ratio, SLR, which forces commercial banks to buy government bonds. It has been as high as 39.5% in the past. Interestingly, SLR is a concept, is only used by just one country, that is Bangladesh. Otherwise, nowhere else it's used. And so financial repression helps finance the fiscal deficit, but a huge cost of the development of commercial bond market and the availability of domestic capital for the private sector, especially micro, small, and medium enterprises. This is one of the binding constraints. The land is another binding constraint, especially after Land Acquisition Act, and it becomes almost impossible to set up an economically viable unit in the small scale if you want to buy a new piece of land and set up a small factory. Human resources, there is an interesting element, although some of the issues we already know about the skills and so on and so forth. But it also suffers from Dutch disease, especially with the emergence of ICT. So all the talent is sucked by one industry, that is ICT. And it has created a benchmark which is way high than the prevailing market prices of the jobs. So it has blunted the competitiveness of the manufacturing at the cost of high growth of ICT. This is one phenomenon I think that needs to be researched further, but I mean, this is what we feel. Raw material, you have already mentioned about a very high tariff, and not just tariff. More than the tariff, it is anti-dumping duties, it is safeguard duties, is quality control orders, even on items which are not even manufactured in India, where some company would say that I am going to, or I intending to produce the goods 2 years down the line when QCO comes. And that would increase the cost of import like anything. Two more factors are justice delivery and technology. You have mentioned about technology, but MSME sector, Rakesh Mohanji is sitting, he has been instrumental in writing the book on small scale sector long back, and especially focused attention of policymakers on the clusters. So now around 1,000 industrial clusters are there in India, and technological obsolescence is widespread. When you wrote the book and the report, at that time, the biggest issue was the reservation of SSI sector. But as a matter of fact, reservation is gone. But most of the sectors have not been able to do the fill the technological gap with the competing nations, especially the 4 or 5 that you have just mentioned. I'll quickly, how much time do you have? 2 minutes. 2 minutes, okay. So 2-3 more points. One on the FTA, that why most FTAs failed. I think one of the reasons is, first of all, we have been doing FTAs with the nations that we compete. And there also, we always used to share with them a list of items which we call as sensitive list. And unfortunately, at the last moment, this sensitive list would also include raw materials and inputs. So the very purpose of the FTA is lost, and most of the MSMEs would not be able to take advantage of economically priced raw materials. Second point is the low, one of the issue that you mentioned is the low backward linkages in Indian industry. And one of the reasons there is that, especially for MSMEs, imports are not economically viable. So even if, for example, the trade policy would allow us to import duty-free inputs, but practically it is not possible. Who's going to quote me 1 ton of steel or 1 ton of copper? So theoretically it is there, but practically it is not possible. And unfortunately, it is the MSMEs that are exporting. Most large companies have avoided getting into the nitty-gritties or the vagaries of international competition. They would rather sell their goods under the protected environment in India. It is only the small-scale industry that is exporting and try to sort of get into international trade. On labor, we are aware of many of the issues. And finally, the state of competitiveness in economy, and where the issues are of regulators. Who is going to regulate? Regulators are something, almost all regulators we are finding that they are not working and they are not meeting the expectations for which they were made. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Bhardwaj, for those. You've given us a lot to think about. And I will wait. We will wait. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions from the floor. So, Mr. Goyal, you have the floor.
Yeah.
Please, from Shahi Exports, and I'm sure you're going to be in the hot seat. So you have about 8 minutes, if that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Kathuria. Good evening to all of you. My deliberations would be a little bit different than what, theoretically has been put up to you. I'm from the government sector, so my discussion would primarily concentrate on the government sector and the apparel sector, which is a very, very labor-intensive sector. So when you talk about the competitiveness, then in the government sector, there are two major factors which contribute to the cost. One is the raw materials, and then it is the labor. Labor costs are equivalent to the raw material cost. Whereas raw material costs are 30%, labor costs are also 30 to 32%. So if I cover these two factors in my competitiveness, then I sail through. Most of the time I sail through. So what is the problem with the raw material? Let us start with the raw material. There are two types of raw materials. One is the cotton, mainly. I'm talking about the main raw material. And second is the MMF. MMF is mostly either imported or we have high concentration of the manufacturers in the MMF sector who are, pricing their products according to the tariffs which are imposed on the MMF imports. If the tariffs are low, then they will, lower their prices. If the tariffs are high, they will mark up their prices. So the whole market game is in their hands. And what about cotton? In cotton, in 2002, when Vajpayee government was there, they had introduced BT cotton, all right? At that point of time, our cotton production has increased. After that, there has been no serious attempt to import new seeds or bring in new technology to increase our cotton production. Our cotton production is declining day by day, right? And our imports are increasing. The last year, our imports of cotton was 26 million bales, whereas our exports are only 11 million bales. So we are net importers of cotton in today's date. And then above all, we are also imposing 10%, 10 to 11% customs duty on cotton imports. If we are not competitive in the raw material, then you can well imagine how our end product would be competitive in the international market. Second aspect is of labor. Now, labor, I will talk about two aspects of labor only. One is the cost of labor. Second is the availability of labor. Cost of labor depends upon the minimum wage, which each state is having. Different wage standards, minimum wage standards. The industry would be concentrated in those areas where the minimum wage is low and the availability of labor is high. That is why you will see that most of the labor-intensive industry you will find in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, or the belt of Chhattisgarh, Odisha, where the labor is amply available. But in government sector, another problem is the attrition of the labor. Labor requirement is so high. In our organization, we are employing about 1.2 lakh laborers in our factories. And with the attrition rate of about 3% per month, I need about 40,000 people every year. Now you can well imagine the level of skilling which will be required to skill that labor, to train that labor, and to employ that labor in the factories. That is why our products are not of that standard which the international buyers require. They want zero defect, whereas our defects are 6%, 7%, or even in some cases 15%. That is one problem where the competitiveness of our industry is lacking, right? Then the third part is in the labor-intensive industry like apparel, the labor is skilled or semi-skilled. It is not highly skilled. The semi-skilled labor or the unskilled labor has a problem of mobility. They want to be at their home. The remuneration is not very high. They cannot, shift to the urban areas because the cost of living index is high. So that is how the labor-intensive industry nowadays have to go to the point where the labor is available, not to the other areas like the industrial estates or the other developed areas of the state government. Now, third point which my colleague has mentioned that there is a lot of domestic demand. That is how the industry is able to export their products, because they are getting their ready-made market in India. What we need right now is the export-led growth, which we were hearing, a lot of time, that whether we should have growth-led export or export-led growth. With the kind of increase in the domestic demand, we will not be able to increase the share of manufacturing. We will have to take recourse to the export. And for that purpose, we have to come to that standard where our products are internationally accepted. Now, one other problem here is the unorganized sector. Because of the unorganized sector, because of the MSMEs, because of the low investment industries, they are not able to bring up their product to that standard which are required in the international market. And then, because they are unorganized, they do not know how the compliances are to be made. Because in today's date, one major factor which is playing the role is the compliances. We are working with about 80 global clothing brands. Zara, Calvin Klein, Tommy Hilfiger. Every brand has its own compliances. And trust me, those compliances are much more severe than what the state governments or central government compliances are. So those compliances costs are also added to your product cost, and the unorganized sector is not in a position to, meet with those compliances. Next major problem is the problem of scale, because our markets are majorly captured by the MSMEs. We are having about 40% MSMEs in India, contributing to 42% of exports. Right? The contribution of large-scale industries is confined to either those products which the MSMEs cannot make, okay, like steel products, electronic products, autos. So in those areas, only large firms are existing, whereas in labor-intensive, you won't be finding the large-scale industry. Then there is another problem of government policy, I will say here. The government policies are majorly favoring the MSMEs. If you talk about the bank rates, there is a scheme for MSMEs. If you are, about the land allotment, there is a scheme for MSMEs. Then why the MSMEs would, scale up their production? There is no advantage for the small scale to scale up their production. So this is one major problem which is hindering our scale, which is not allowing industry to grow. Then in garment sector, another major problem where India is lacking is in international market, 70% of the garments are MMF garments, man-made fiber garments, and 30% garments are only cotton garments. Whereas what we are doing, our major export is of the cotton garments. 60% of our export is the cotton garments, whereas 40% of our export is the MMF garments, because of a costing system, because we do not have technology, because we do not have scale. MMF garments require scale, because majority of the MMF garments are high-end garments, where the realization is about $15, $20, $25 per piece. What we are making, Tripur is making $2, $2.50 per unit. And other industries are making $6, $7. My unit is making $6, $7 per piece. If I have to increase the export, then I have to go into that segment, which is not right now available in India. We are not producing jackets. We are not producing heavy clothes, because neither the raw material is there, nor the machinery is there, nor the technology is there. So this is one area where I think the government has to come up with some schemes to see that this type of industry is set up and this type of industry is facilitated. You're saying something?
No. Why do you want the government to come out with schemes? Why don't you just tell them?
See, sir. I will explain my aspect. See, I'm from industry. Right. So, right now, the situation is, if the government is not supporting, if the land is...
Then Let's say come and cut the duty over the raw material. And if you're on capital goods too high with the caveat, why do you want a scheme?
No. I mean to say that only. Sorry, I do not want that the government should come with the incentive schemes. Yes. I am not saying that. The government should support. Government should extend the support.
Rationalize.
Definition of government should support is that some joint secretary works out something yojana
No.
for which he gets a budget.
I mean to say
Policy change, we cut the duties and let us run with it.
I will say that the complications which are there in acquisition of land, in complexities in getting the approvals, right? And the follow-on litigations which linger on for years. These are some of the practical problems, sir.
Okay.
And then when we talk about the machinery, technology, sorry, I will concentrate on two aspects of the technology. One is the technology in the machinery sector. In the garment industry, we are still importing jukis, we are still importing fukuharas, knitting machines.
When you can. When you not want to be promoting the machinery sector.
No. See, if we have to be competitive, if we have to industrialize, then we have to have our machinery also. And the R&D in machinery is, to my mind, is very important to reduce the prices and investment.
Just the most successful export effort we have had is software.
Yes.
When that was started, there were people then who said, this is body shopping, we must produce our own computers. Had we followed that, the software industry would have been dead on arrival. So what I'm saying is, why do you want to do this going backward linkage?
Sir, the component of computer in my software export would be, I think, very limited as compared to the investment being made in the textile machinery or a textile unit. Anyways, so, and then our R&D in the fabrics. We lack R&D in the fabrics. What brands are doing? Brands are giving us, samples of the fabrics, that this fabric is being made in Korea, this fabric is made in China. You bring that fabric, right? And then produce garment for us. So that is also one field where we can concentrate on R&D activities. And that fabric can also be exported. Not only the garment, that fabric can also be. I think most of the points I have covered and my time is also up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Goyal. And then lots of food for thought from both the discussants. TG, would you like to add anything?
A minor point, as a discussant, I strongly recommend this book. And on another one, you mentioned about the Dutch disease kind of effect coming from the ICT exports. I happen to have looked at it at Rakesh's suggestion, and our real effective exchange rate in India is misaligned to the tune of 10%, according to some recent IMF study. Suppose you do a counterfactual experiment of removing the ICT service exports, it will further add 3% more. So I just wanted to tell you the total misalignment of the real exchange rate is about 13%. What will it do to our manufacturing export competitiveness? It's going to definitely affect sectors like apparel, which are low complexity products where the margins are low. Definitely, it's affecting those products. These are some of the findings in a separate thing which I have done.
Okay, so we have 30 minutes precisely for discussions, which I hope allows a good amount of back and forth. Please just, given that there are lots of issues, just be very precise in your questions and just state who you are when you ask your question. Thank you. Who wants to go first? Lavish, I think. Right hand.
So fascinating presentation, discussions, remarks. I have got a single question, and actually it's from both of our guests from industry, Anilji and and Goyal ji. We've heard this for 25 years. You've made countless representations to the government for even more years. 35 years. Right. And everyone, in a sense, knows everything in this whole space, right? And you know the person sitting on the other side understands you, but is unable to move, right? So now, what do you think needs to be done to at least get at least one single priority item through on the other side? So you can't do 20 things. Can we do just one thing, and what would that be, which you think would
Justice delivery system.
Okay, on your
Everything ultimately boils down to that platform, and it fails. 30 years. Yes.
yourself?
What would be your answer?
Justice delivery system.
One thing.
I will say political stability. That has to be there. Because what we find is in some states where the political scene is not, conducive to the industry, then the industry closes.
Because if I could just add to it, because whatever commitments a government has made, a sovereign government has made, the other government that comes replaces it. Unfortunately, we should be able to take that government to the court. But unfortunately, that's where we are failing. It is everything ultimately boils down to the court, and court fails. Thank you.
The company when the government to force this failure.
Sir, for example, two government departments are litigating. I am a supplier to, say, State Electricity Board, and it fails to honor its commitment, does not pay me. I go to the Facilitation Council, which is set up by the state government under MSMED Act. Then I win the case. Then this particular case is challenged in the lower court, then in the higher court, then in the Supreme Court. It takes around 10 to 15 years. Whereas at the same time, you have a Reserve Bank of India policy where it says that if there is a delinquency of 30 days, then you would be marked as SMA, your account would be marked as SMA. So ultimately, it is the government, that has not been able to honor its commitment. You have taken it to the court, but it has taken 30 years. That's where it's failed. And it is not just one isolated example. So as a matter of fact, Abid Hussain Saab, you know very well. So I share, I can say, one experience with him. I was with him in China. And one evening he said, Babu, that's how he used to say, Babu, Government of India ki baat aur gadhe ki laat ek barabar hai. The point was that you really don't know when the policy will change. That's what he was also referring to. But there is no recourse to this behavior. What would you do? So we had made a sovereign commitment that, okay, we'll take, you join in 1948, that you join the, say, sovereign Indian government, and then we'll give you reports. After a couple of years, we can say did not honor our commitment. Nothing happened. Ultimately, and I give you another example, sir. So Tata was inaugurating Nano. And I was also there just beside him, like other people from different associations. And somebody asked, as you remember, Nano, he promised that I'll give you in rupees 1 lakh when it was, this whole project was started. But by the time it came out, it was costing approximately 1.5 lakh. So somebody asked that, sir, what would be the cost of this Nano now? Because cost of raw material has increased. And his one sentence was to be written in the gold. He says, promise is a promise. Promise is a promise. So even, in private sector, you would see that people who are ready to walk the talk would, you can say, follow their promise, meet their promise. But unfortunately, in our government system, there's hardly anything. That's why people are so afraid of committing in India, so afraid of investing in India. There is no finality. Okay.
Neither at the state government level nor at the central.
Thank you. Sure. But first, that gentleman here. Can you just introduce us? Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, myself Binay. I have a question for Mr. Goyal. You made a correlation between the high level of attrition in your employee base and the consequent quality related issues you face in terms of competitiveness. So my question is, what do you do as a company, as an organization, to retain talent and minimize attrition?
We'll gather a bunch of questions. Yeah, that lady at the back there. Or yeah, sure.
Hi, great presentation. Just one question. Out of all the factors that the categories that you spoke about, which are important, and you did a cross-country analysis. So is there any correlation about that this category has a highest correlation with integration in the global value chain or highest share over time or something, so that we can prioritize that this is the area that we need to focus on?
Okay, you got noted that. Anupam, then Rana. Okay.
I'm sorry, I came in late, so I missed the presentation itself. I would like to get a copy of the paper, but I just wanted to, one factual question, does it cover all sectors or individual sectors or certain clusters? And because I think the story is quite different in every, there are some systemic factors, but specifically I would like to address the point that Mr. Goyal said. What you said rings very true, and my views are somewhat different than others. And the only thing that I find very problematic is 42 years ago, I cut my teeth in India on industry, manufacturing competitiveness, and we looked at, Sanjay might remember the technology one which followed it, but I started looking at textiles. And textile machinery was an issue, labor was an issue, quality of labor, cotton was an issue, synthetic fibers was an issue. We subsequently did all that. The surprising thing I find is that at that time, textile machinery, I also did a comparison of India and China. Out of 23 sectors, the one sector in which India was competitive with China, according to the delegation that accompanied Rajiv Gandhi there, was textile machinery. So what happened? If you're saying textile machinery we are not able to compete because our machinery industry is not good enough, or we are too dependent on imports, why is that? Similarly for labor, but I mean, they're all of them.
Sure. Babu, aap bole.
Starting actually going back to Lavish's question, but so I'm going to push on that one. Let's say you can get either India's labor laws to become much more flexible, or you can solve the land problem. I think everyone talked about that. Which one would you want? And this is really to both Mr. Goyal and Mr. Bhardwaj. You represent different industries. I mean, in your case, it's straight garments. In your case, it's a broader one, but if you would just focus on labor-intensive manufacturing.
Okay.
You just add one thing.
Sorry, check.
In the presentation, from the industry, they did not say land, if I noticed the chart correctly. They kept on saying labor. But in your presentation, you added land. So, I mean, yeah, that's why I think it makes it even more interesting.
Okay, we'll get one last one from here and then go back to the panel. Oh, sorry. Actually, you were before. Sorry. Can we go to the lady first?
Thank you. My name's Madhu and I work with Pradhan. My question is to Mr. Goyal, and we we're facilitating many young women to, into employment after skilling. So the issues we're facing, and most of them are kind of a large percentage is going into apparel. So I heard you talk about attrition, but the perspective from where we stand, we see that the attrition happens because of the low wages that are paid to women in apparel and continuing to be paid low wages even after, several years of remaining in the industry. So where exactly is the issue? Why is the industry not able to pay women better wages? So where is the problem? And we see that, in fact, the firms that are involved in export actually pay lower wages than the firms that are involved in producing for domestic markets. And that's something that, I've been also told by your company. So,
Okay. There's also that subject. Let us know how much are the workers actually paid, the range. Yeah. Okay.
One last one here before we go to the back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Ravi Bhuthalingam. My question is on global value chains. I'd like to ask the panel what they think of what Prerna brought out in her presentation. That is the importance of India getting into global value chains. Now, as I understand, the RCEP, which we declined joining about 6 years ago, membership is still open. And also, I understand that these arrangements like RCEP or CTPPP have fairly long transition periods, which help industries to adjust. So, in this situation that we find ourselves today, would the panel support India's renewed effort to try seriously for entry into these two blocks? And I ask this question because in my unofficial discussions with various industry people, everybody is very ambivalent on these things. In theory, they say this is a great idea, but when it comes to will your industry be happy, they all back off. So that's my question.
And free trade for everybody but my industry. Okay, sure. I think a lot of questions directed at you.
Yes.
You can address them succinctly.
Is it working? I'm audible?
Yeah.
So the first question was from the gentleman that how we are tackling attrition. See, in Shahi, we are running around 120 skilling centers in India, in hinterland of India, right? We are supporting those centers, and those centers are being run in association with different schemes of central government and under CSR and under funding from the various organizations. So in those 120 centers, we manage those centers, we have the masters over there, we administer those centers, and then we take our, labor from those centers.
So, but in the first place, what is the attrition? 30% plus.
See, attrition rate is, why attrition rate is there? There are so many reasons. There is no one reason. One reason could be the lower wage, right? The person is getting higher pay somewhere. Even if he is getting 500 rupees higher, he will go. He will leave. Then 80% of our labor is women labor. They have their domestic problems, they have problems with children, right? So because of those various reasons, then we have a cultural issue with our labor. Festival aa gaya, gaon chale jao. Spend 10 days. Go for 10 days, then come back after 3 months. So these are practical issues which happen. Then the second question was that we were excelling in the textile machinery. You were saying that. So to my mind, we excelled only because of the Lakshmi Machine Works, LMW. We do not have, other machineries which are required. So that is what the position is. And the third question was, what is the main problem, land or labor? To my mind, labor is the biggest problem. Of course, land is a problem, but because whatever land we need, since we go to the hinterland to put up the factory, then we get the land. So for us, labor is one of the major issues. The next question was, how much is being paid to the labor? Ma'am, because the textile industry, especially the apparel and garment industry, works on a wafer thin margin. You have to understand the model of the apparel industry. We are supplying to the global clothing brands. Right? Those global clothing brands, they have offices in different countries. From wherever they will get the cheaper goods, right? They will place order there. So we have to be competitive to even those countries which are not so much taxed in foreign countries like Bangladesh. So that is how we have to cut our cost at every point of time, and we have to be on the minimum wages. That is why what you will find is wherever the minimum wages are low, the textile industry goes there. So what is the level of gains? Sir, it depends from state to state. What is the minimum wages? But 12,000, 14,000, 16,000, something like that.
It's been constant in the past.
No, it increases every 6 months. VDA increases. Ma'am, in our factories, every 6 months, VDA increases. And the minimum wages also are increased by different state governments periodically. Some governments raise in 5 years, some raise in 7 years, some raise in 3 years. Now, you have to understand if my labor costs are 30% of my total cost structure. If a state government increases the wages by 30%, my cost of garment goes up by 9%. Whereas my margin is 5%. So I'm out of the market.
Also, the warranted payment, maybe he would be interesting. Very, very rigid warranted.
So over time, although we work in shifts, so we don't go for much for overtime because overtime rate is twice the normal rate. Whereas in Bangladesh or in China, the rate is only 25% higher.
No contract labor?
No, it is not contract labor. It is regular labor on the roads.
That's all. All right. Thank you very much. TG, let me come to you, and then I'll go to Mr. Goyal. Do you want to take up any of the questions?
What do you want me to address? I think everything was directed to him.
No, there's a broader question on GDC's RCEP. Do you have any?
Of course, and RCEP and CBD, we should be joined. That's my view. And my only doubt there is whether we have the competence in terms of the trade economists and trade lawyers to come to quicker timeline in joining. Otherwise, like the EU agreement, they're running for decades. There's just no point in saying they would like to join without staff who are competent to prepare the government. That's what I feel.
Yeah. I think what I would like to add to that, just a quick thought, is that, I think the question should be changed now, flipped, is what would it take?
Yeah, exactly.
Rather, it's no longer a question of why, right? What would it take to join? Because the center of gravity is now accelerating because of what's happening in America. It's even accelerating further towards Asia. So we have to look at Asia. And the big games in town are RCEP and CPTPP, right? With the Pacific included in that broader conception. So I think that we have to flip the question now. What would it take for us to join this? The CPTPP is a gold standard, okay? So there is an ambition there. Intermediate RCEP, what would it take for us to get there?
Sir, just one question. Some people are saying labor is incompetent. They are skilled. Now TG is saying trade economists, bureaucrats are all incompetent. Style. Vishwa Gurus and how can everyone? It's a serious question. That given the population of 1.4 billion, now 10 billion graduates coming out every year. Yes, I know there's a huge quality difference, right? I don't understand it's incompetence business, whether it's the number of industrial workers is so low compared to the population, organized industrial workers. So I don't understand how can everyone be incompetent? Are we all incompetent here?
It's a question which we have to think about, but
I can answer about the labor.
But let me first go to Mr. Goyal, then back to Prerna. Yeah.
Okay. So land on labor, I would definitely go with labor. Why labor? The Economic Survey 24-25, Mr. Nageshwan says our labor laws are gold-plated. So this is a serious comment. And let's also have look at the statistics that although we are saying that we have 7 crore enterprises in India, including MSMEs, of course. But the number of factories employing more than 20 people is just 2.5 lakh. 2.5 lakh. And it is precisely because of very high cost of employing labor, especially the social security cost. So we are trying to put a standard, copying a European standard of a 30 to 40% of social security cost. We are finding it very difficult to create mass scale employment that is needed in the formal sector. People are employed, of course. I mean, a large number of factories, of course, you would have contract labor and so on and so forth, where minimum wages will be given, more or less. But the social security cost, ESI and provident fund and so on and so forth. So I think on one hand, we are giving crores and crores of doles for people who are sitting idle at home. And we are actually penalizing people who are working in the factories by creating such regulations. We need to think about that. That's, I think, very important. With regards to the RCEP, joining RCEP and other trade agreements, I feel that, before we join any of these trade agreements, whether it is RCEP or ASEAN or others, we need to do a lot of homework first in India. A lot of reforms are needed within India. Unless we do the other, if, for example, if we are not ready to reduce or not address the question of very high tariff problems of QCOs and anti-dumping duty at the drop of a hat and so on and so forth, how you're going to have to compete with the products that will be coming at zero rate of duty through this mechanism. That's the point. And then it's also like signing FTA with China. We are already finding it very difficult to compete with China. Indian manufacturers will be ready to compete with China at zero rate of duty. That's not a question.
Okay, thank you. Prerna, some questions on the structure, paper, and so on.
Yeah.
Yes, so on Rishita's question on which is the most important factor for integrating into the supply chains, there's no doubt it's the import tariffs. So that's the fundamental thing that we need to lower down the tariff levels to integrate into the value chains. And on the sectors, the competitiveness index analysis is not sectoral. But then when we corroborate it with industry discussions, then we talk to sectors like auto components, pharmaceuticals, apparel, and electronics. And in the paper, we have, based on this, we have a section on sector-specific priorities as well. But the main analysis is not sectoral.
So, quantitative analysis.
So yes, that's what I'm saying. That it's not not sectoral. It's overall.
There's a qualitative analysis by sectors, but not quantitative.
Yeah. Yes, Karthik.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a more general question to everyone here. Given the analysis just got from one of the speakers on labor costs and all of that, do we think that manufacturing growth at some point will have to compromise on improving the labor standards in a country like India? Is that what we are understanding, that cost is such an important factor that growth in manufacturing will have to compromise on labor standards at some point?
Can I answer it?
Yeah, we'll just collect quick questions. Yeah. Shishir, Rakesh, and that's something really. Okay, the last one there. Absolutely.
Just a quick, I would like to understand the duty drawback system, because my understanding from industry was, though imports get tariffed, but for exports, at least the industry gets duty drawback.
Theory. Okay.
So in theory, but from industry, they said it's not that difficult also. So I would like to just understand from industry. Thanks.
Okay, Sanjay, from what we've heard, particularly to do with labor costs, suggestions for you and Prerna and TG, do some real work, which is that we need to look at comparative numbers. What are wages that we are paying in these relevant sectors? What are the social security costs? Are we really paying those? And then compare them with their competitors. I've never seen this. But we just keep saying labor costs. But the poor fellows are paid almost nothing in India. I mean, 15,000 less than what you pay a domestic servant in Delhi at least. So to say we're not competitive with labor costs, I don't understand. But I would like to know that the data on this side, because I don't know that what are the real labor costs, what are the wages, what kind of skills, and what are the real social security costs. because for poor people, medical costs, if they go to government hospital, it's free. Yes, it's a hassle, no doubt. How much medical insurance do they get? So I'm really puzzled by all these things. And it's been going for years. I mean, we started the industrial policy reforms 35 years ago. 34 years ago, to be exact. After 34 years, the industry is saying exactly the same thing they used to say then. There's no difference whatsoever. It's worse, actually. So I don't understand what they've been doing. In textile machinery, no one has stopped any company from putting up good competitive textile machinery. But why have they done that? What's the problem? If LMW could do it, why not anyone else? There used to be lessons that was removed long ago. Yes, textile industry, I studied. Also, another Abhidasan committee on textile industry, which I wrote. And yes, there were huge problems. We had really handicapped our textile industry for ages. But all those things are gone. So I really want to know, what has industry been doing for 35 years? They say the same thing.
There is the hand up there, and then Lavish, last question.
I don't know much about these topics, so I'm just going to ask a general question. First of all, it's really nice to have practitioners over here at CSEP, because we usually hear it, from very high level experts. So I'm glad that we kind of get these insights which we often don't know over here. But one thing I want to ask is, why is it that the large industries are not being engaged in export-led development? I think a gentleman made a statement saying that only MSMEs are doing most of the export. Is there something they know that we don't know, that it's actually smart to not go into the global supply chains because of the instability which is going on? I mean, as we can see right now, a lot of people keep asking me, how is India being affected? And I said, not as much as I think a lot of other countries are, which are very integrated into global supply chains. So why are we in this rush to go and integrate into these global chains when we live in a world which is so turbulent? When we live in a world where we don't even know what's going to happen now.
Thank you.
So,
yeah, last one here. Yeah.
Oh, 5 seconds from me after the move.
Okay.
I get to have the last one.
You don't have the last laugh.
This is just to follow up on Dr. Mohan's suggestion on the labor thing. I think skills, it's very interesting. We always talk about skills, but when both of you were actually responding on the labor thing, I noticed you're focusing on costs and not skills. And to me, that makes perfect sense, because I think the skills issue when it comes to labor intensive manufacturing, it's about following standard operating procedures. I mean, that's my understanding. We've seen studies done for Foxconn, Pegatron, etc., and they also have high attrition rates, by the way. I think these are all industries with high attrition rates. And the point they make is, it's really about just following standard operating procedures. You basically just need disciplined workers who come in on time and just carry out the orders, or whatever the tasks are. So it would be nice, to just disentangle, because I feel that this skills thing always just goes off and then it gets into a black box. So if we're getting into labor costs, labor regulation issues, the issues of, just all these costing elements are very distinct from the labor. I just urge distinction to be made.
So I'm just linking the wage, the technology part that Dr. Mohan made with productivity. Could it be that one of the reasons why you are supposed to pay such low wages is because you believe that they are less productive compared to your peers in, let's say, other countries? So you're getting lesser, let's say, garments out of a single worker in India than you may get in other countries. And could it also be because you're perhaps using lesser capital? Even for a labor-intensive industry, you're perhaps using lesser capital than some of the other countries or enterprises in other countries might.
Okay. All right. So back to you.
Yes,
first.
First question was on the cost of labor. You had said cost of labor. See, I entirely agree with you that if you are paying your wages low, then you cannot expect productivity, high productivity, right? It is a double whammy for us. When we are not able to, put more cost into labor, and then we are suffering from the quality and quantity both. my labor productivity is only 55% to what Bangladesh and China is having. Even Sri Lanka is having. My labor produces 9 shirts a day, whereas in Sri Lanka, it is 20 shirts, 18 shirts in Bangladesh. So it is not that the labor, it is only the labor cost. It is the productivity and the facilities being given to them. I personally feel that if we take care of the labor, we have to spend a little bit, maybe more, but the productivity will be high. So that is what we are working on it right now in our productivity factor. Then there was a question on drawback. Yes. What is the procedure of drawback or what?
Is there a problem? Is there a problem in
In textile sector, there is no problem with drawback. Rather, drawback rates are adequate.
Not rates, is the procedure.
Procedure is also very automatic. There is absolutely no issue. After the digitalization, we just export the drawback comes to our dam. Yes.
Do you have a thought on that, on the drawback issue?
Actually, the question is not of drawback. Drawback is more or less automatic, through the GST route. The problem is if you want to import the raw material before or after having affected the shipment. So it is through this route. Theoretically, you can import duty-free raw material. Government of India schemes allow that. But practically it is not possible because your requirement is very small. Nobody is going to quote you for a very small consignment. That's the problem.
Sorry, on that one, we don't allow a bulk importer who then
Possible.
Do we allow that?
Yes.
And then who then gives it to passes on to small
different countries, they do it. What they do is
that allowed or not?
No, it is. We do not allow it. It is not. It is allowed only against the license, the advanced license. So as an exporter, you will get the advanced license. You import the raw material.
Only bulk
You can't sort of aggregate
aggregators
for different.
Only bulk quantities are aggregated by the canalizing agencies. Suppose you want to import fertilizer, right? Or some onion. Suppose you want to import potatoes from often. Any quantity which is to be imported in bulk, that the agencies, canalizing agencies are there. State enterprise, like effort is there. ST Rana was there. Rana, yeah. So they combine the demand, they import, then they distribute. And State Bank of India and some other agencies also have this scheme for gold. For small jewelers, if you want to export jewelry, 1 kilo, 2 kilo, you can register your demand with the bank, right? Get the gold from them.
Yeah, but not the
So the problem
Not in our
is
industry.
So the problem is this: for certain items which are standard like gold, you can have a bonded custom, facility. It is possible. In case of steel, there are more than 10,000 varieties. It's very difficult to develop such a mechanism. It's very difficult.
I mean, there are countries with the aggregation possibilities. There has to be a regime for aggregation. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? There's one question on why large firms are not exporting. You want to take that?
No, I told that large firms are exporting. Yeah. So I'm not especially speaking about the garment sector. That's a very different thing.
Yeah.
But yes, the situation is this, ultimately businesses are for profit. And if as a large company, I can find that, by increasing my custom duty in India, I can have the profitability much higher, then why would I would rather go out in the world, sell it at thin margin, face competition. That's the point. There's a director's call, that's a company's call. So I would not name, but a steel company, for example, having a compound profit growth is more than 65% per year. Imagine 65% per annum for the last couple of years, continuously, because of anti-dumping duty, QCOs, safeguard duties. So cumulative impact is 30 to 40% higher than the international prices. Of course, you can imagine what would happen to the downstream industries. That would render them uncompetitive. But this company would become profitable. And especially it is happening in those sectors where PSUs are also there. So PSUs are you can say, front-ended. So that we need to save this, and then behind, then you have private sector companies that will be raking in profits like anything. It is open in the public domain. You can see the profitability of all the companies that are having anti-dumping duties. That will tell you the story. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes, he was having a question on textile mission, but wearing this question. I also worked in Department of Higher Industry. We were dealing with the textile machinery sector as well. What I find is wherever the textile machinery sector is 10 years ago, it is same right now. I do not know what is happening, whether there is a lack of R&D, there is a lack of investment, or one more thing is there, that second-hand machinery which used to come, that machinery basically has not allowed the domestic manufacturers. We used to import second-hand machinery, especially the embroidery machine, that other machinery like this, which has hampered the domestic machinery sector. Whereas it has increased productivity in the textile sector. See, we have a problem in India, the capital also. Our entrepreneurs are not so rich that they can invest anything in the machinery. So wherever we are finding cheap machinery, we import as an economy. So to my mind, that was one of the factors which has not, made this sector this thing. One question was from this side. Skilling pe question. Aapka question was skilling pe? What was the question?
I quit. What the topic depends on this technology. Could it be that you're not using as much capital as some of your peers in other countries do, and as a result, your labor productivity, your laborers can produce less?
No,
I'm saying, is there a comparison that you can make?
We have not made any comparison, but I will not, find this factor more relevant, because in textile sector and garmenting sector, what is there? Sewing machines. एक 30,000 की sewing machine पे 2 बंदे काम करते हैं. So my capital to labor ratio is, very low. So it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Skilling में क्या question था आपका?
What is there a skilling problem? Or and if there is it that the workers are not following instructions, or they don't know how to?
There is a skilling problem as well, right? In our units, we have a system of reskilling people, so that the defect is less. Whereas in India, the defect is 15%. In our factory, it is, sometimes 2 to 3%. There are some units of ours where 2 to 3% defect. So reskilling is very important. Most of the time, if you are getting 40,000 workers in a year, 1/3 of your labor leaves every year. So you need 1/3 of the labor. You have to skill them and then reskill them. Then next year they will also leave. It is continuous process.
Yeah. Okay.
Any final any final thoughts?
No, the final thought would be on R&D, as has been discussed, that R&D is a problem, but then why are we not able to improve it? And one of the things that we recommend is to have greater competition. So why are we more protected in terms of even the final goods, coming from other countries, which can foster competition and facilitate more R&D. So as we see in the vinyl sector, that while you are reducing inputs duties, but then still we have high duties on the finished goods. So by opening market even to the finished goods, we'll be able to foster competition and do more R&D, because the lack of R&D is a challenge, but we have been talking about it but not doing anything. So sound.
Could I answer?
I think it's more of a thought process. It's not something that you can get to immediately. Any final thought? Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much. We've gone about 12 minutes over time. So I'll just have a couple of things to say. It's been a very rich and very varied discussion because I think the paper has touched on many core themes. So land and labor has come up a lot. Which one is a bigger constraint? I would suspect it is to do with also what Mr. Goyal is hinting at or getting at, is that it depends on the nature of the industry. Where you're less price sensitive, you're into more complex and higher value products. There, the issue is, they are more worried about the land part of it. They have to locate in urban clusters and all. They're the land, and they're able to. We didn't hear the labor issue coming from their side. So I think we have to differentiate as to who we're talking to, and I think this is also what Anupam was getting at. One issue I have to say though is on this land, what you pay. So I lived in Bangladesh for 3 years. I was so impressed by the scale of their factories, right? So 5,000 people is normal under a single roof, right? You have to believe that that does great things for productivity, right? And now, because of the Rana Plaza incident, they have now become healthy. There's safe spaces for, hundreds of factories in maybe thousands. I don't know the exact number, but there's been a lot of massive improvements in safety and health and all of that. So there's productivity. Yes, they get paid the minimum wage, which is lower than what we have. But they're also, their productivity, conversely, is actually, as you say, is higher because I think of the setting that they have, and therefore quality control and all of that. They have much less issues than what you're saying we have in India. Even for the premier exporter, garment exporter in the country, I think it is something to really think about. If the premier garment exporter is saying that we have 6% defects, I mean that's really a problem issue of skills and the attrition issue and all of that. So Mr. Trump says tariffs is a beautiful word, right? And actually, I agree with him in our context, in the reverse way, right? Because a lot of people say, why aren't we not exporting? Why are large firms not exporting? Domestic demand is very different from foreign demand, synthetic versus cotton, all of that. I mean, so because the tariff side of the story, we are an outlier in the G20 when it comes to tariffs. Of any comparable economy in the world, we still are an outlier, right? And that's why Trump is getting after us, right? Amongst others, but he's really called India out repeatedly, right, on this particular issue. Now, this is the beauty, the magic of tariffs, right? So we are a large domestic economy. If you erect those tariff walls or other barriers through QCL, naturally, as a business person, the incentive is to focus. How can you fault the business for focusing on a protected domestic market? And they will try their utmost to keep those barriers high. But if we reduce those, right, then they're very capable, right? They'll be forced to look at the external market. So this anti-export bias, what economists call, works in these two ways. One is high cost of inputs, but also the protection and therefore the disincentive to export. That is also a very important and forgotten part of the anti-export bias story. And this is something that we've tried to bring out. So, I think we will reflect on all these comments but I think we've had a very rich discussion. So thanks to all of you for coming and staying till the very end. Sorry, it's gone a little bit over time. Thank you.